You know him already, Berlin-based Ben Aris, former Russia correspondent, editor-in-chief these days of BNE IntelliNews. Ben, were you listening to Joe Biden? You know, I don't think you had to be an international diplomat. I was sitting in the chair on the other side of the studio, and when he said minor incursion, I took a note of it because I thought, how are you saying that? As well as Biden commenting that there's some disunity in NATO about how to respond to Russia's current position. What did those comments mean, and what will the effect have been across NATO and in Ukraine?
That press conference was all a bit of a train wreck, wasn't it? Biden said a whole bunch of things that he shouldn't have done, which actually addressed some real problems that the Western allies face in this showdown with Russia. As for the minor incursions, President Zelensky tweeted like a few hours ago that there is no such thing as a minor incursion. I mean, Russian troops crossing the Ukrainian border is an invasion, full stop. And that to play down that is nonsensical, because it undermines the resolve of the West to face Russia. Because what Biden's suggesting here is that there's actually a plan for a graded response, that if, you know, 2 Russian soldiers cross the border, that the US and the West do not want to go to war with Russia, that they will do some sort of appropriate, proportional response. And at the same time, there is clearly disunity in the amongst Europeans in terms of, you know, the Americans have come out with very harsh sanction list, including something like cutting Russia off from the SWIFT international money transfer system. But it was reported here in Berlin just this week that the Germans are not down with that would cause a crisis in Europe. It would make it impossible for Germany to pay for its oil and gas imports from Russia, because it wouldn't be able to send any money to Moscow. And they're going to taking that off the table, which is something that the Americans want to keep on the table. So consequently, we had Bilkin in Kiev yesterday in order to show solidarity with Ukraine, but he came here for this, what is probably a key meeting between the Brits, the French and the Germans and the Americans, in order to shore up a common front, because tomorrow he has an even more important meeting where he's going to see Sergei Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister. And that's the meeting where they're going to say, look, if we do this, what will you do? Because the round of diplomacy that was last week will be concluded only when America hands in this formal answer, this written answer to Russia's demands. And that hasn't happened. Blinken said yesterday he hasn't got that letter ready. So this is really the last chance of some sort of negotiation with the Russians before they definitively say, no, we reject your demands, and then we see what Putin does next.
Almost nobody expects the West, at least, to engage in a military confrontation with Russia over Ukraine. So that would leave sanctions. You've been talking to us over the past few weeks about extremely harsh sanctions which are being prepared. Just tell us about Nord Stream 2, because again, in that news conference, President Biden said, you know what, if we were to sanction Nord Stream 2, OK, maybe that's a possibility. But remember, this is not a one-way street. And he talked about the importance of European money being given to Russia for that gas that would be coming through Nord Stream 2. Is Nord Stream 2 really that important to Russia? And would Germany agree to allow it to be a part of a list of sanctions?
Nord Stream 2 is one of the most divisive issues, particularly between the US and Europe. It's extremely important for the Russians because they need to sell gas. It's one of their main export earners, and Europe is one of the main clients. They sell 10 times more to Europe than they do to China at the moment. And the Germans also want it because it's secure supply. It will improve their energy security. I mean, we're in the middle of a gas crisis at the moment because there's not enough gas. And Nord Stream 2 would solve that problem immediately. So the Germans are very keen on it, but the Americans are much less keen on it. They want to export their LNG to Europe, and they want to sort of bosh this. And they also see it as a way of hurting Russia if they stop it. But then the arguments that have come before is the Americans have threatened to sanction German companies who were involved in it as a way of stopping it, which the Germans, of course, took umbrage with. So it highlights the complicated relations amongst the allies against Russia, because you have conflicting interests. And America's the other side of the pond. It's not really involved in Russia. It doesn't really do that much trade with it. It's not really heavily invested, whereas Russia remains a huge market for Europe, and the Germans in particular are heavily invested with significant economic interests in Russia. And so they're trying to find some middle ground. They're a lot more dovish on the relationship with Russia. They really don't want this to blow up. And Europe is dependent on Russia's energy imports. I mean, it's a key source of energy, and particularly gas, at a time when Europe is trying to move away from things like nuclear and coal. Gas is relatively clean energy source. So the Europeans are trying to find a middle path between all of these conflicts, and the Americans are being a lot more stringent because for them it's a geopolitical rivalry fight.
Ben, for the moment, thank you very much indeed. I'll say until the next time, and we know, of course, there will be a next time. Ben Aris in Berlin.
Tomorrow.